This is a ongoing video conversation regarding a custom terrain project being made by Terranscapes. For more information on how Terranscapes can do custom work for you, visit Terranscapes.com. This board represents a modification after our discussion to include the area provided for buildings. And what I've done on this map very quickly is I have, instead of drawing directly on the boards, I decided to use paper, which is a little more mobile. The white strips that you see are roads, and the green represents the river or stream. The yellow represents the building footprints possibly, and here we see some more white for the roads. Very simply, what I've done is I have taken some of the features of the board and magnified them and slightly enlarged them to provide room. To have room between the road and the river, we needed to do that, and so that we could have a bigger footprint for the buildings. Also, this represents a compromise between the exact layout of the map shown here. Now, of course, YouTube compression compromises the quality of this, so I hope viewers can see this. But here we see the town representing the buildings and the river and the road here. This is very, very tight to scale on this map, and I don't think it's going to provide you very much room to put in buildings. So by expanding that, it gives you a little bit more of a footprint. These sheets of paper are 8.5 by 11. And the Warlock house that I showed you in the previous video would comfortably, I think, fit on one of these sheets of paper to give you an idea of size. Part of the expansion of the map, I think also one thing to consider is that it might be advantageous to make a compromise between the direct and to-scale layout of the battlefield and to compromise that with the ability to actually do the layout on a table that will be portable for you when you move from location to location, and something that you can set up in the house without taking over the entire house. So originally this board was going to be a 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. There are 2 rows of boards that are not represented, of course, at this time. What I thought might be an interesting compromise for you that I'd like you to consider is that instead of going out 2 more rows, to simply include 1 more row of boards here, and to add an additional row of boards along the bottom. And I think that will give you a better sort of scale representation of the distance between the 2 armies, and allow you to include as much of the terrain within that area as possible with closer to the scale, rather than trying to compress everything sort of in our scale here vertically and having it stretch horizontally. I don't think that's going to work very well, but it might be possible, and if you'd like me to examine that more, I could create some sort of prop boards to set aside, and then we could lay sheets for the roadways, etc. on that side to take a look at what that might look like. So just a quick idea about some of the sizes of these things. I decided that the roads might need to be a little wider than the original 1.5 inches that we had discussed, to put them a little bit more in context with the buildings here. So these roads are 2.5 inches wide. And while that's probably a little small for a road to scale with these buildings, it's more than ample to represent a footpath, and I think that's a nice compromise. Again, I'm looking for that middle ground. A nice compromise between the size of the buildings and the size of the figures. The other thing I did is I slightly expanded the swamp area, a very small amount, just to show that, to bring it in a little bit more into scale with the surrounding board, but not to make it so large that it dominates this whole corner of the board and doesn't provide any room for troops to move around it. The river is 1.5 inches wide, these strips of paper, but don't forget that we also need the 3 inches on either side to provide that gradual slope down to the stream. And in some areas that might be a little tight, of course, within this area here, but there's some room for flexibility for the river, and depending on the actual buildings and their layout, this could be moved. Of course, this building has some room to be slid over. I'm just placing them here for reference. This road over here was originally here. I've moved it over as part of course, that magnification, but also to provide a little room to potentially shorten up this hill and widen it, as was discussed in the last video, as well as to take this hill and move it slightly over to the side. That way, I think it would put it a little bit more into scale with the magnification of the board and make that corner a little bit more attractive as well. And provide room for the trees that are eventually going to be placed on this side of the hill, which I envision, unless you correct me, having them feather off slightly off the hill and onto the flat area. So that'll give a little room between that and the hill here if I move it over. So I hope that gives you at least excuse me, a better update of what changes I had envisioned, and a good framework for you to give me feedback on whether I'm on the right track or not. So as a final reminder, one thing to consider was potentially expanding the width of the boards. Instead of the 4 feet, it say could come out to say 6, and we could do 2-foot board caps on this end of the layout, and then do a full row all the way across on this side, which would, looking at our original map, which would provide for a little bit more of this area here, which is currently cropped off of the map, and as well as provide for this area right in here with the next row, which would preserve this bridge, which I'm sure was tactically important, although of course I'm not really quite sure, but will omit under the final production a portion of the map on this side as a compromise for trying to capture some of this and to show the width of the battlefield a little bit more accurately.